Hey guys, Sarisa here from Perth Can and Craft. Now, I have to be honest, I hope I'm not gonna butcher this guy's surname, okay, because that's what I'm talking about. So it's Fredrich Nietzsche, I think. And he says, some people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Now, one of the things I'm often asked about is, one, can a bulldog be taught new tricks? And two, can I help them with a dog that's being reactive to children, right? So there's a combination here. Now, the first thing you need to know, as long as a dog, like I can teach any older dog new tricks or new things, if the dog is physically and mentally capable of learning. It's very simple. So for example, if you think about if I was teaching an older person who has dementia or short-term memory loss, that's gonna be a lot harder, right? Now, the problem occurs when you have the owner's goal and you have dog's goals who are completely different. So, especially when it comes to kids. Okay, so what I mean by that is we got to look at what reactivity means. So in my system, there are two subcategories of reactivity, but the main thing about reactivity is it's responses, it's reactive behavior without the intent to actually harm. So the subcategory is, it could be potential play, where the dog gets really frustrated. The more frustrated they get, the more intense their behavior becomes. And then when they're able to explore that drive, they then create collateral damage. So that's, like when a kid plays, dogs play way too rough and they're not really paying attention to the other dog and they get hurt, or the child and they get hurt. The second thing is, let's fight to run away, as Jack Sparrow would say. And this is usually one of the things with dogs and kids. I personally think it's very silly to leave two sentient beings who have no impulse control together unsupervised. I think that's very silly. So I think that's not fair. Now, if you think about kids and you think about dogs, one of the things with dogs in the hierarchy of needs is their very first goal is safety, then comfort is second, and then third is acquisition. So if you leave your kids with your dog and the dog's being pestered and harassed, and you then expect your dog to not only tolerate this behavior from the children, but to enjoy it as well, I'd say that's very ludicrous, right? So, and because if the dog's getting more and more, like they want quiet, they want to rest, the kid comes to pester them, that then becomes very uncomfortable for the dog, and later on it becomes a safety concern, right? So that's kind of what I mean with goals. So the owner wants the dog to play with the kids and tolerate all this nasty stuff, but the dog also has needs and wants that we need to consider. So the thing is, if there's a big gap between the ethics and your expectations, that you're going to create a big problem. And personally, it would be very unethical and unprofessional to place any dog in such an unfair situation that causes undue stress, just for the sake of, your children getting to do what they want. Now, if you've got to think about this, usually most dogs, especially when they're very young, they tolerate quite a lot. And usually they'll try and be appeasing, maybe they'll try and play, they'll try and escape, they'll try and avoid. There's these tiers of behaviors, of coping mechanisms. But if a dog then realizes that even though this isn't working, they'll stop doing it because they're not insane. Like Albert Einstein says, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you expect different results, you're insane. So through trial and error, the dog will go, well, clearly none of these are working, so I need to escalate my behavior. It then becomes, very normal and natural for the dog to then escalate into growls. So that's like threat of violence, like you do this, I do that. So if you don't want me to growl at you, stop doing this. Later on, if the child is ignorant or they think it's very funny and there's no intervention from an adult, it is very, very normal, natural then for the dog to actually escalate into it could be a snap or it could be an actual nip. And the problem is most dogs are predators and they're quite strong in their jaws, and children's skins are not as tough. And if a dog is, at the same level of a child, where they snap can also cause a lot of damage, especially if it's in the face, if they snap in defense. So, and the thing is, the problem is, the fault here is the adults in the child and the dog's life, because you shouldn't be putting your child or your dog in that situation in the first place. Because who enjoys or even just accepts that, another sentient being is rude and, and pesters you for long periods of time, especially if they find it amusing. So again, you should really not be doing that. Now, here's the crux of the situation. If you leave it up to your dog to sort it out with the children, then one, you cannot complain about the doctor's bills. All right. So if you're gonna have to fix your dog or your child, being bitten, that's it. You can't complain about the psychological trauma that causes, where now we might have a child who potentially is afraid into adulthood about dogs. And three, you can't blame the dog and then put the dog down and say, the dog has bitten a child, so we just put it down. You've got to understand a little bit behind that. But here's the biggest problem with this. The problem is that if this continues to happen, then it will accumulate, and then the dog could actually potentially do what we call generalize, to expect the same behavior from different children. This makes them less tolerant to other children and can actually lead to innocent children being snapped at or bitten. And this is usually where a lot of people will say, well, it came out of nowhere. My child just walked up to the dog. My child was giggling and running past. But in the dog's mind, because of past history, it's created this expectation of, this is what's going to happen, and this is the techniques that usually work. So as a professional, I can help people with reactivity with their children, because I've done so with many of my clients. But usually we got to establish that we have the same value systems and we have the same ethics. And if we don't have that, then I'm not the trainer for you, and I cannot help you, because I just believe that you should not place a dog in an unfair situation and then expect them to not only tolerate it but enjoy it. That is silly, stupid, unacceptable, and dangerous. So how about you pull up your socks and start managing these two sentient beings? You have to advocate for the dog if the child is being abusive, harassment, silly, and all that stuff, but you also need to advocate for the child. So you got to think about it that way. If you're not willing to do that, that's not a good mix. And I think a lot of dogs are actually put in family homes where the adults in the family think that the children will be fine. They're not fine, because children just react impulsively. How do I know? I've seen it. I've watched it happen. And I have no problem stepping in to protect a dog. And I hope that you will do that too. Thanks for listening. Ciao.